Welcome, and thank you for attending our webinar. I have some housekeeping notes before we begin. Because of sound quality, it's necessary to keep you muted throughout the program. You have the ability to ask questions using the questions box on your control panel. As a provider of continuing education, ICS follows specific guidelines and regulations when presenting continuing education events. We appreciate your professionalism and honesty in accurately recording the number of CE hours you attend during any given program. We recommend you be on the webinar screen for the full webinar. The system can tell if you pull up another screen, such as your email, and will show you as inattentive during that time. ICS bases the amount of time you are attentive when considering your CE hours. Polling questions are asked during the webinar. They're also used to gauge your attendance and CE credit hours. You must have your pop-up blockers turned off or hold down your CTRL key in order for the polling questions to work properly. If the polling questions do not function for you, simply write down the question and your answer and fax or email it to me, or type your answer into the questions box. An online survey will display on your screen when you leave the webinar. Please take 30 seconds to provide us with valuable feedback. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Ken Arp has been with the OSHA program for approximately 15 years as a Safety Compliance Officer, Health Compliance Officer, and a Senior Industrial Hygienist with the OSHA Consultation and Education Program. In addition to conducting numerous OSHA compliance walkthroughs of various businesses as a consultant, Ken also gives 20 to 30 OSHA compliance talks per year. He spent several weeks in New York City monitoring air quality after the 9/11 attacks and time in New Orleans area providing safety assistance during the cleanup after Hurricane Katrina. Please join me in welcoming Ken.
Hey, thanks, Denise. I haven't really done too many of these webinars before, but hopefully this will go fine. And I would like to say that if you do have a question, please don't hesitate to ask the question at any time. Also, you do have my phone. My direct phone number is on this first current slide. My email address is there. We're not going to, I'm with OSHA Consultation now. I'm not in OSHA Enforcement. We're not going to be turning anybody over to OSHA Enforcement. If you call us with a question, we're there to help you. That's what your tax money is being used for, and it's a free service. So if you've got questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. Or call us and ask, or get our call or general number if I'm not in the office. I won't be in the office tomorrow nor the next day. So I really encourage you. Our objective is to have a safe and healthy workplace for all employees. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. And if we can help you do that, because you're probably a smaller employer, you don't have a lot of time to be involved with OSHA, reading OSHA books on manuals on how things have to be done, we can help you get in compliance. So without any other further ado, I guess we'll move on. So if I can get my screen to move, which I am not able to do, it seems to be locked now. Great, okay. There we go. We'll talk a little bit about what the OSHA program is. We'll talk a little bit about, there's a little bit new with regards to hazard communication or right to know, the new global harmonization system. They call it GHS for short. A few more training requirements if you have any hazardous chemicals that you should be doing for your employees because of this new global system. And then we'll talk a little bit about the common hazards associated with an office setting and how to be in effective compliance with OSHA regulations. So hopefully that will be our objectives and what we'll try to accomplish. So Denise, our first polling question is now available. So
Okay, if you'll all hold down your CTRL key, I will launch the poll now. So it's a yes or no. OSHA doesn't pertain to us because we have fewer than 10 employees. Oh, we have 100% voted. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Do you see those there? We've got 14% said true and 86% said false.
Well, the correct answer would be that is a false statement. OSHA doesn't necessarily go out and like to inspect companies that have fewer than 10 employees. However, if you have one employee, they are covered by the OSHA standards. So, and that's just the way that's the way it is. Any employee, if you're a true employee, you're going to be covered by the standards. So there are some cases where they don't like to inspect places that have fewer than 10, but believe me, it won't make any difference if they show up. They will come in and inspect if they have an employee complaint. Jurisdiction, who does OSHA have jurisdiction over? Well, they're going to cover anybody who is an employee, somebody that's a true volunteer, meaning they're not compensated in any way, are not covered by the OSHA regulations. OSHA gets very concerned about employees when someone has a paycheck and you're paying somebody to do something. Now you have to make sure they're doing it safely because you have some power over them. If they're a true volunteer, you can walk away from something. You're not getting paid. You just say, fine, I'm not going to do it, or you can choose to do it if you're a true volunteer. Independent contractors, those that might be somebody who possibly you hire somebody to do your lawn work. They might be a true independent contractor, meaning OSHA, if they do something that's unsafe, you're not going to be responsible for it because they probably have employees, or maybe maybe the person is their true self-employed, and then OSHA really doesn't care. If you're self-employed, you're paying yourself basically. So no one has control over you by offering you money to do something. So, but independent contractors might be somebody you hire to do lawn work or something in that manner where you're not directly controlling how they do it. You just say, hey, I need my lawn trimmed out front, so-and-so. Those people, if they get hurt, OSHA is going to be looking to the person who's supervising their work as to how safe they're doing it. So if you're not supervising how that employee does that, then you don't have to be too concerned about whether they get hurt or not doing it that way. So anyway, if you're self-employed, you have no employees, then there we go. Then OSHA is not concerned because you're not holding a paycheck over yourself to do something. So two different sides to OSHA. There's OSHA enforcement, which a lot of people are familiar with. You know, the regulatory compliance, you can get cited, you can be fined, it's not confidential, you can go on OSHA's website, you can see who they've inspected, what they were cited for, how much the fines were. OSHA consultation is a voluntary compliance scenario. That's us. You have to ask us to come in if you want some help. We're not going to be showing up at your door unannounced for a compliance visit like OSHA enforcement. They're going to show up and you're not going to know when they show up. They're just going to be there. They can't tell you by law when they're going to show up. So us, on the other hand, is somewhat similar to hiring a private consultant. If you were interested in safety and health and you wanted a review of your facility, your office setting to see what sort of hazards are there, you can hire somebody, or you can bring us in free of charge to do the same sort of a thing and look for the typical types of hazards that OSHA enforcement might find if they were there. There are obviously no fees, no penalties for what we do, and it is confidential. You can't find where I'm going tomorrow, where I was yesterday, et cetera, et cetera. That's all confidential. We can't tell OSHA enforcement where we go by law. If we do, we get in trouble. There is one scenario where we can tell OSHA enforcement where we've been, basically, and that's if we find a serious hazard at your facility and you absolutely refuse to fix it. And then we can turn that over to OSHA enforcement for abatement of that hazard. It's never been done as long as Iowa OSHA consultation has been in existence. So most people want to fix any serious hazard that is found. Inspection priorities. OSHA enforcement has a priority system of where they go and what type of places they inspect. Most of them, or a majority of the inspections that OSHA enforcement does, are unprogrammed inspections, meaning they didn't come off of a computer, off of a list, and say, here, go inspect that place. The first and the main priority is imminent danger. If you're driving down the road, you see a spoil pile on the road, you see an employee down in that hole, and that soil could collapse on an employee, then that's called imminent danger. That's our number one priority. If we don't have that going on at the very moment, then a catastrophe or fatality is next on the list, number two of our priority system. Obviously, if we've had a fatality, OSHA enforcement is going to inspect. Okay, if you have a catastrophe, for OSHA's definition, is 3 or more people are admitted to the hospital from one event. That would be deemed a catastrophe. And a fatality or a catastrophe have to be reported to OSHA within 8 hours of the occurrence of that. So that's number 2 on our list of priorities. Then complaints and referrals. The most likely scenario where a chiropractic setting is going to get an OSHA visit from OSHA enforcement will come from a complaint. That would be the most likely scenario. An employee complains, that will generate an on-site inspection if the employee chooses. It has to be a current employee, but that's the type of a thing that's most likely to occur at a chiropractic setting. OSHA enforcement is not going to be coming to a chiropractic setting or a low hazard type of an industry on a regular basis. They have to concentrate on places where people normally get hurt. Therefore, they're not going to be going to schools. They're not going to be going to office-type settings unless there's a complaint or you've had, heaven forbid, a fatality or a catastrophe. Okay? They can show up because of an accident or an amputation, but that normally doesn't happen. An amputation is sent to OSHA. I doubt that we're going to have an amputation in the chiropractic office. An accident can occur, but normally that's not going to generate an OSHA inspection unless an employee complains. And then the other type of inspections we have are programmed inspections. That the computer kicks out the company place to go and inspect. Your type of a facility is not going to show up on a programmed inspection. So if OSHA comes knocking on the door, that's not going to be the reason they're there. They're probably going to be there because of an employee complaint or you've had an accident. Right? Your options, if OSHA does show up at your door, you do have a couple of options. You can let the inspection proceed. Perhaps you're not there when OSHA shows up at the door. You can ask them, you can tell the person who is there, say, hey, OSHA is here, and you can say, well, could you ask them to wait until I get there and before they proceed with their inspection? And you can certainly do that, and generally speaking, they will wait up to an hour for you to get there. After that such time, they're going to probably deem it as a refusal, and then they will go get a warrant, and then they will be back. And that may be the same day, that could be the next day, 3 days later. There's no set time frame on when they will be back, but they will be back, and they will get in. A good place to start, reading the OSHA book is confusing, a lot of information there. Most of it's not going to be too relevant to a chiropractic type setting. But what I would say you should do without reading the OSHA book is follow operators manuals for any equipment that you have. Once you start deviating from what the operator's manual or instruction manual for that piece of equipment is, now you are accepting liability and you're probably putting an employee in danger. Again, if you want to use it yourself, you're not an employee, OSHA has no jurisdiction over things. But once you start asking employees to do something, you better make sure they're doing it safely. And most of that information on how to do it safely is going to be in the instruction manual or the operator's manual. Don't use defective equipment if it's broken, if it's not the way it came from the factory. If it's altered, it's now, again, now you've got some liability. Things have been changed. It's not working the way it was from the factory. We've altered it. We took a guard off, etc. You don't want to do that. Don't use defective equipment. There's a liability there, and people can get hurt. Don't try to anticipate what the defect is going to do. Once you've noticed a defect in a piece of equipment, try and get it fixed and take it out of service until it's fixed. Review the information on the OSHA website. That's not a bad place to go. And certainly, I would tell you probably the easiest and least painful thing to do is probably bring in OSHA consultation, have them do a walk around, and they're going to point out to you the things that need to be fixed and how to have a safe place and what sort of written programs you should have. That's probably the easiest thing for you to do. It's relatively painless. It's they will set it up with you, on your time frame when it's convenient for you to do the walk around. I'm going to estimate that OSHA could be there, OSHA consultation now. We could be there for, I'm going to say, a couple hours to bring you totally up to speed. If you already are up to speed on a lot of things, it might be less time. If you don't really have any clue and you don't have any written program, you might need a couple written programs. They can help you with those. You don't have to go out and necessarily purchase a written program to be OSHA compliant. Realistically, too, the written programs are just a small part of it. Keeping your employees safe, that's what we're really interested in, not how good your written programs look. It's how safe are your employees. You can't discharge an employee for filing a complaint with OSHA. Okay, so don't do it. The amount of the fines, they're all over the place. Normally, the type of a fine that a chiropractic type setting is going to receive is probably going to be, it could be $500, it could be $1,000, it could be no fine at all. Depends on how serious the hazard is, how many employees you have, the size. Well, I already said that, the size of your business. But a lot of different things go into that. I would not be too concerned about the OSHA fine. If OSHA is there, I'm more concerned about why they're there and to deal with that. Because if they're there, we probably had an employee complaint. And so you need to be in compliance with OSHA regulations. But the fine generally not going to be huge. But it can be if you mess around with them, then yeah, the fines can go up in a hurry. You are required to have some posters. You can go to this website from iowaworks.org and you can download those posters. Don't necessarily have to go out and buy them from anybody, okay? But they do need to be up if you have employees. Required programs and documentation. First thing on here is your OSHA 300 log. This is probably something that you're not going to have to keep because a chiropractic setting is a low hazard type of a facility. Generally speaking, unless you get a special request from the state of Iowa to maintain a 300 log for them, you are not going to fall under the jurisdiction for two different reasons. One, you're low hazard, and two, you probably have fewer than 10 employees at any given time during the year. And those two will exempt you from that 300 log. Either of those will. A Sharps log, I heard Denise mention acupuncture. Acupuncture is probably going to require you to keep or have a bloodborne or an exposure control plan. We'll talk just a little bit about that later. And if you had a stick, you'd have to be required to keep a Sharps log. So that's probably one of the more hazardous things. If you're into acupuncture, you got to make sure you do the bloodborne pathogens program, and we'll get you that or show you where to go to get that program. You can call me, etc. You might need to have a written emergency action plan, a hazard assessment. That should be in writing. That's going to be pretty simple for your type of facility. Emergency action plan, we'll talk a little bit about that. Fire prevention, a little bit possibly there, how you're going to prevent fires. That's pretty simple. Exposure control plan, again, that's the one for blood or potentially infectious body fluids. And then lockout, tagout. You start working on equipment. Even changing light bulbs, you need to be sensitive about who's doing that. How trained are they? I would say, if you're the employer, you probably should be doing that. I wouldn't want my employees even changing the light bulb. I mean, things can happen. It's just, it normally doesn't, granted, but it can. Make sure your employees are trained to do whatever you're asking them to do. I would recommend that you document the training too. That will help. Have your operator's manuals and instruction manuals for any equipment. And I'm thinking probably don't have much equipment that employees use that they can get hurt with, unless possibly you're doing your own mowing of the lawn or something like that, or outside maintenance. Then certainly make sure those that equipment, power type tools, are in good shape and working, and that you haven't taken any of the guards off. If they have seat belts or rollover protection, you're wearing them, etc. Follow the operator's manual. Any employer must assess, if they have employees, you've got to assess your area for the hazards. And if there are any hazards, we need to either eliminate the hazards or protect employees from the hazards. So you conduct a hazard assessment. And OSHA could ask you, and I got to tell you, most of the time in this your type of setting, they're not going to ask you for your hazard assessment. But it's like telling you, do you get picked up for going 1 mile an hour over the speed limit? No, normally you do not. Is it a violation? Yes. Can they pick you up? Yes. And the same thing here. Can they ask you for your documented hazard assessment for what the hazards are that your employees are exposed to? Yes, they can. It's required. They can ask you for that. Normally that's not going to happen, but it could. Anyway, I'll show you what that looks like. But then eliminate the hazards. If you can eliminate, then provide the PPE, either the glasses, say acupuncture is the one that comes up to mind. You're probably using, hopefully, maybe you're trying to get away from latex gloves. Use non-latex gloves because of the allergy or possibility there. That's when I can see doing a hazard assessment. Should we be wearing eyeglasses or safety glasses or goggles for acupuncture or something like that? Other than that, I can't think of any PPE I'd normally expect you to be wearing. So anyway, document your training and provide that personal protective equipment, which might be a glove if you're doing acupuncture, and then the employee's probably not doing that. The doctor is probably doing the acupuncture, so you should be wearing the gloves probably, and the employee is probably not going to be required to. Here's an actual certificate of hazard assessment that says who I, so-and-so, certify that I did the evaluation on this date, and then you sign it and date it. That is a document that they could ask you for. Do it. OSHA wants somebody to actually sign off on it, so that if they see we're perhaps again, I'm gonna turn to lawn mowing outside. Maybe an employee is mowing the lawn outside. They don't have any safety glasses on. They don't have any hearing protection in. They're going to say, hey, who did the PP assessment for that? Where did you find the information? How did you determine that employee didn't have to wear safety glasses or earplug? If you look at the operator's manual for the mower, probably going to say in there, wear safety glasses and wear hearing protection. So that's one way you do a hazard assessment, is to read the manual for any piece of equipment you have. But if you're not doing the outside work, then I can't really think of any PPE that you'd be requiring your employees to use. But maybe you've got some. Type in a question or a response if you've got something that you have questions about. Emergency action plan. Hey, it needs to be in writing if you have more than 10 employees. If not, you can do it verbally. Basically, you need to decide, what are we going to do for a tornado? What are we going to do for a fire? Where are we going for the tornado? Employees, if I ask an employee, hey, there's a potential for a tornado, how are you going to be notified of a tornado? And the employee should know, well, we have a weather radio. A lot of people have weather radios. That's a good way of getting notified of a potential for a tornado. And then I'm going to ask, well, where are you supposed to go for a tornado? They should be able to respond back to me with where they're supposed to go with regards to a tornado. And then I'm going to ask, okay, if there's a fire, how are you going to be notified, and what are you supposed to do for a fire? And then they should be able to respond back appropriately. Well, we're supposed to evacuate. We're not going to use fire extinguishers because we haven't been trained on how to use them. And that's kind of a little tricky one that kind of slips by a little bit. So we're probably going to say we're going to evacuate the building and we're going to meet out wherever. You decide where you need to meet. Maybe you have a secondary location to meet outside in case the wind is blowing in that direction where your first meeting place is. So that's kind of your emergency action plan. There is an e-tool out there that you can use that asks you questions and it will generate an emergency action plan for you if you need one. Again, fire extinguishers, it's a piece of equipment that you probably have in your office or facility. Therefore, because it's a piece of equipment that you have and then it's available for employees to use, have you told them not to use them unless they absolutely need it to get out of the building? Or have you need to tell them, hey, I haven't trained you on how to use fire extinguishers. I would like you to evacuate only unless you need the fire extinguisher to get this. The fire is blocking your exit. We need to get you out of the building. Then, okay, go ahead and use it. But I'm not asking you, or nor do I want you to use a fire extinguisher. Those are probably there because of some local code or building code, or your insurance carrier requires you to have a fire extinguisher. But it is a piece of equipment in there. So if we haven't trained our employees on how to use it, then we do not want them to use it. So if you do want to allow your employees to use the fire extinguisher to put out small fires, and let's put parentheses around the word small fire, then you need to train them annually. And that's probably something you're really not going to want to do. But if you do, it doesn't have to be hands-on annually. You can do a trifold, a review on a yearly basis, review the PASS system on how to use a fire extinguisher. So up to you to decide on what you want to do there. Identify your exits unless they're clearly obvious. Okay. Put up exit signs. HAZCOM, right to know. Hazardous chemicals. Do you have any? And how are we going to determine if they're hazardous? Well, most of the time you're going to have, you can acquire an MSDS or an SDS sheet for that particular chemical. Okay. If they make a material safety data sheet for that chemical, it probably is hazardous. You do not have to have a HAZCOM program if it's a consumer, if you meet these three requirements. It's a consumer product, meaning anybody can go purchase it. You're using it in a consumer amount, meaning not any more than a consumer is going to use it, and you're using it in the same way a consumer would use it. If you're washing windows professionally, a window cleaner would fall under the HAZCOM standard. If you just have it in the office and you occasionally use it to wipe something down, probably a consumer product not covered under HAZCOM. Okay. If you have a disinfectant that you're using and employees are required to wipe down tables and etc., that's probably going to fall under the HAZCOM standard. So that's going to require you to have a hazard communication program, to have your list of your hazardous chemicals, to train your employees, and to label all of your hazardous chemicals. Here is a site where you can download a sample or model program that includes both hazard communication and bloodborne. Don't ask me why they put them both in the same publication. Download it, swipe it or copy it, dump it into a Word program, and then you can go in and edit it and make it compliant with your facility. Okay? That's your HAZCOM and your bloodborne pathogens program if you're doing. And we'll talk bloodborne pathogens. We'll talk about that a little bit, about whether you need one or not. I'm going to say if you're doing acupuncture, you need one. Train your employees on those hazardous chemicals. You don't have to do that annually, but you do have to train them initially, technically before they have an exposure. But obviously, you can do it now. And then hazards of the chemical. Tell them what the hazards of the chemicals are. What are the signs and symptoms of an overexposure? Does it turn my hands red? Is it irritating, etc.? How to protect your employees. They say, well, you know, we got this cleaning stuff, and it's it's irritating to your hands, so we're going to provide you with a nitrile glove or whatever, if that's necessary. So tell them how to protect themselves, what the signs and symptoms of an overexposure are, and what the hazards of the chemical are. And that's the sort of training under HAZCOM that we would like you to do. The new label, the new GHS system, the new labels are going to be standardized now when they come out. They're going to have 6 pieces of information on it. Some of it's always been there, like the name of the chemical, number 1. Number 2 is a signal word. It's either going to be danger, or it's going to be the word danger or warning. You'll see down here, number 2, I'm moving the cursor around. And then there's also going to be, that's new, so we need to train them on that. There's going to be 2 different words. Then we can also tell them what the hazards of the chemical are. Those are the hazard statements, number 3. Number 4 are precautionary statements. Those will also be on it. And all these labels are going to be fairly uniform. The main thing, well, number 5 is the name of the company. That's always been there. But the pictograms over here, these are new, and we need to train employees on what these pictograms stand for. I would recommend that you put up a poster with the pictograms on them that shows what the hazards are of that particular chemical. You can go to OSHA's website, you can download it, print it off, and post it for the employees to see. Label your containers. Okay? If a container isn't labeled, it can be deemed a hazard and you can get cited for it. You need to have the name of the chemical and the hazards of the chemical on there. You can either write the hazards of the chemical and the name of the chemical on there with a magic marker. You can do that. If it's an irritant, you write irritant on there. That will do it. Some people use the NFPA diamond to convey hazards, but then your employees need to know what the blue stands for, what the red stands for, what the yellow stands for, and the rating system. Is a 4 or a 1 worse? Well, here you can see a 4 is the worst. So you need to train them on that, or write the name of the hazard on the chemical. Or if you're using the manufacturer's label, then you are good to go. Compressed gases, you got to make sure they're secured. The tops of these things, if they tip over and the top comes off, they can go, they're like a missile. So make sure they're upright and secured. And of course, compressed gases are hazardous. They're a hazardous chemical. Train your employees on how to use them safely. Bloodborne, if you're doing acupuncture, you're probably going to need an exposure control plan. That other website, you can go there and download that. You can split that document once you download it, copy it, and paste it. You can split it up into a bloodborne pathogens and a hazard communication program. If you have exposure, potential exposure to the blood or other potentially infectious body fluids, you need to train your employees annually on those hazards. And that document will basically tell you what you need to train on. Provide the PPE or the personal protective equipment to protect your employees if they have exposure. And then follow the other requirements of the plan. So once you download that plan, it's going to tell you pretty much what you should be doing. If you have a sharps container, don't overfill the sharps containers. That's the common thing that happens is people fill them above the line and they look like this. And then that's obviously a hazard. You go trying to put another needle in there and you're going to get stuck. So don't overfill them. Eye wash. Do you need one? Well, if you have potential exposure to corrosives, you need an eye wash. And that's not the little squirt bottles. That's a plumbed-in unit like you see alongside the the drinking fountain here. Bleacher concentrates can be corrosive. Question. Here's your question. Here's a question, Denise.
Okay, if you'll hold down your CTRL key, I will launch the poll now. And the question is, how do you know if a chemical is corrosive? Choose the best answer. He gave that a few slides ago. You're not graded on this. It's to gauge that make sure you're on the other side of the computer paying attention. We have a couple more people who need to vote. If it didn't pop up for you, type it into the questions box or fax or email it to me. Oh, 100%. We're going to close the poll, and I'll share the results.
All right.
So we had, let's see, call OSHA and ask 15%. The solution irritates the skin in a diluted form 8%, and the word corrosive on the MSDS 77%.
All right. Well, we're going with the majority here. We're going with number 4. So yes, the word corrosive has a technical definition under the HAZCOM standard. And the people who create that chemical are required to produce an MSDS sheet if it's hazardous. And they will specifically use the word corrosive. If they use the word irritant, it is not a corrosive. The difference, corrosive means it can destroy tissue, and irritant means it doesn't destroy. So there's a big difference here. So the word corrosive is the key here. If they use that word, then that chemical is corrosive. And you have potential exposure to it if you have it in your facility. The best thing to do is try to find something that's not corrosive. Get something that's an irritant. If you can't do that, technically you're required to have an eye wash station. So, but, if you guys got questions, certainly don't hesitate to call and ask us. We will help you out. Lots of different hazards at a facility. The common ones, a lot of them deal with electricity because you all got it. Electrical hazard, a block breaker panel. That's a hazard for OSHA. They will write a citation for that. Easy fix, move the stuff. Exposed wires, again, easy fix, cover it with the approved cover. You open the breaker panel box, all the breakers need to be labeled what they're for. In an emergency, we want to be able to turn off the right breaker. They need to be identified. We don't want to see any openings in here. If you have an opening, say one of those gray boxes down here, say the knockout's missing, and it's exposed, and you can see bright shiny stuff in there. If you go in there and touch that, that's going to be a bad day. So we need to have that covered, and not with duct tape or electrical tape. That needs to be an approved blank put in there. Okay. So make sure all the openings are covered, and you've labeled all the breakers. Oh, here we go. Here, question. Already so soon. Okay. Question for what's the most serious concern or OSHA potential citation possible here in this photograph?
Okay. Hold down your CTRL key, and I'll launch the poll now. Do you want to go? Oh, it covers the photograph.
I did.
I should have. Yeah. I should have waited on the poll, but no. When I bring the poll up, it just shows the poll. Sorry. So far, so good. Everyone's getting the correct answer. And we have 69% voted, so yeah. All right, 100%. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. And yeah, we only had probably one person that answered soap container, and then everyone else got the outlet.
Okay. Yeah, OSHA requires that all outlets in restrooms be ground fault circuit interrupted. And here we go. Here's a picture on the right of a ground fault circuit interrupted. It's got the little test buttons on there where you can test and make sure they work. They do fail. I've seen lots of them that are failed. Test them and verify they work. If you don't have them, you need to get them installed in all restrooms. And I would recommend them on countertops also where you have potential for water. They should go up there. Actually, I think the NEC, National Electric Code, requires them on all counters regardless of whether there's water potential or not anymore. A good thing, a good safety device. I highly recommend them. And then if you don't have them, they do make these others that that you can use that are portable ground fault circuit interrupters. Test your outlets and these and verify that the wiring is correct. I'm going to tell you there are a lot of facilities where the wiring is not correct. These testers are only about $10, $7 or $8. They have a legend on them that tells you when the lights light up what it is, and we do find lots of these where the outlets in a facility are wired incorrectly, and that is a hazard, and OSHA will cite you for that if that occurs. It's hazardous to you and to your employees if they're not wired. Generally, the ground is either open or it's reverse polarity are the two most common types of hazards with these outlets. The tick tracer is used to identify current in a cord. It lights up. They use it to test to see whether a wire or a cord is energized. Try to get away from using these little flat extension cords. You can use them, okay? That's not a citation. Don't hook an extension cord into a relocatable power strip. The gray thing on the floor here is kind of hard to see. Sorry. This thing right here, that's a relocatable power strip. Don't plug something that draws a lot of current into a relocatable power strip. You want to plug the computer, the monitor, etc. into one of these, that's fine. Don't plug something that draws current, a heating element like this does, into one of these. And don't put an extension cord into one because you're kind of daisy chaining that way. They don't like to see that. Okay, you've got the potential to overload the circuit that way. Here's a really relocatable power strip attached. This is fine as long as these are low draw type instruments, right? You can see what the amp rating is on each piece of equipment, and you don't want to go over 12 amps maximum on all of them combined. So you add up everything that's plugged into it, and you don't want to go over 12 amps. We don't cover voltages under 50 volts. So most phone lines, if you still have phone lines, hardwired phone lines, are under 50 volts. So even though this looks kind of gnarly and not something that looks very desirable, it's not probably going to be looked at as an OSHA violation because it's under 50 volts and it's not deemed very hazardous because of that. Extension cords on anything, an easy hit for OSHA if you have either a missing ground pin or damaged strain relief, or the cord is damaged. If you cut all the way through the outer jacket of this cord and can see the 3 interconductive wires, then that's a problem. Strain relief is here. You can see how it's where the plug is and that the cord comes out. It gets stressed there. That is a citation from OSHA. You can put new ends on, okay? You can put a new end on this sweeper. That's okay. Make sure it's done correctly by someone who's qualified. Fire extinguishers, they're supposed to be mounted. They're really not supposed to be just sitting there. I'm not saying they're going to put you out of business for something like that, but they should be, technically, they should be mounted. And then you're supposed to check them monthly, and annually someone will come in and inspect them annually. And but you or the facility is supposed to be checking them monthly and looking at the card. And you don't have to technically document it, but it's an easy thing to do. If you're looking at it monthly, you turn it over and you can sign off on it every month that we looked at it and hey, it's full and it's in good shape. But yearly, you're going to have someone come in who's more trained to verify that they're in good shape. Walking working surfaces. Here's another question. Might the following device be appropriate?
Yeah, so get a good look at that picture. And I will launch the poll now. So was that appropriate for accessing an upper level? 54% voted, 62. We don't have any questions yet. While we're waiting for the last couple people to vote, just a reminder that you can call OSHA and have them come out and do a walkthrough of your office. Totally confidential. I know that a lot of our doctors have had that done. %85 voted. There's still one or two. If the poll didn't pop up for you again, email or type it into the questions box or fax it over to me. I am going to, got 92% now, I'm going to close the poll in a couple seconds. Okay, I'm closing it now, and we'll share the results. Got 33% said yes and 67% said no. What is the correct answer?
I'm going to confess to I don't like, I think I worded this, it should be yes. This is probably an approved device to get to an upper level, meaning only a foot off the floor. I mean, I'm not talking about climbing 10 feet in the air and trying to get to something. So I'm going to take the rap for this one as being a bad question. It's really, I have a degree in teaching, and it's not easy to write a good test question. Sometimes you think it is, but I'm saying to myself, I don't like this test question. It's not a good question. Yes, the real point here is don't use a chair, and we don't want to be using things that weren't designed to be used. This chair wasn't designed to be stood on. It's designed to be sat on. So don't use it as a device to get to an upper level. Use the appropriate thing that was designed to do that. This is not designed to get to an upper level. Don't use the wastebasket upside down. No. And these are the simple things that you just tell your employees. You know what? If you have to get to reach another level, let's get an approved device for that. A three-stepper or something. A bucket upside down is not an approved device to reach and climb on top of. So don't do it. That's where the employee gets hurt. You ask the employee to do something. You didn't tell them not to use something. They use it. They fall. They get hurt. All of a sudden, you have an injured employee. The employee gets upset, or the employee calls OSHA, and OSHA is going to ask you, hey, how did you tell them to do that job, or whatever. We want to have the appropriate device. It could be a step ladder of various sizes, a small one. Again, you got a little common sense here, but it's easy to have someone get hurt once you start going above, a level of the floor that they're on. So just be aware of that. It doesn't happen very often, but if it does happen, unfortunately, it doesn't matter if it only happens once. If it happens to you, now it's a problem. So don't do it. Just give it some thought when you're asking an employee to do something, and then train them. Did you train them on how to use the step ladder? It doesn't take a long time to do that, but technically, do we need to train that employee on how to use the step ladder appropriately? Yes, we do. It's simple. Read all the instructions on the side. There's lots of them there, and you don't step on the very top, nor on the step just directly below the top of the step ladder. You should never be stepping on. The employee should never be stepping on those. If you want to step on those at home, that's fine, but not as an employee. We don't let the employees do that. That's not appropriate use, and nor did we train them appropriately or supervise them if they're doing that. Floor holes, twisted ankles, these sorts of things need to be protected, covered, whatever. We don't want to have our employees exposed to things like this. Stairs are probably one of the most common things if I go to a facility where you have the potential to really hurt somebody if they're not done appropriately. If you have an open side, say you've got a basement, if there's an open side where if you fell off the stairs you could fall, that there needs to be a guardrail there, a stair railing. Okay, you can see here on the left-hand side there is a stair railing because this is an open side. You fall off of here and you're going to be hurt. So stair railings and hand railings. This stair railing also complies as a hand railing. A hand railing is a place to put your hand and slide your hand along as you're going up or down the stairs. If you have 4 or more risers, and these are risers, this part right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have 4 or more, you are required to have a stair railing on the open side. Now this isn't an open side, so you don't need a stair railing here. However, you do need a handrail to provide some, if a person were to slip going down this stairs here, this handrail is available for them to grab a hold of. There was just a fatality, I think within the last month, where a person slipped going down the stairs and died. They fell, hurt themselves, they died. And guess what? No stair railing, nor hand railing. And that's code. You need to have that and protect those employees. That's probably an easy, most of your newer facilities, there's probably not going to be an issue. But sometimes in an older one that's been renovated, or you're going down into the cellar or the basement, then sometimes these are not there. So, if you're messing with electricity, it can be very hazardous to you or your employees. They're probably not. I'm just telling you that I would prefer that you didn't allow the employees to do things like change light bulbs or that. There's enough current in your household current to kill a lot of people instantaneously. The only reason people don't die, primarily the main reason that people don't die when they touch household current, is they're not adequately grounded. You got carpet on the floor, you got rubber-soled shoes, etc. But I'm going to tell you, if you were touching that household current wire and your other hand were touching the sink, the faucet sink, that would be a bad thing. And it takes less than 1 amp to kill a person. You can kill multiple people with 1 amp of current if they're adequately grounded. You can be changing a light bulb. You get up on a steps or up on a step ladder. They go to change a light bulb. They touch, they slip, they fall. They touch the current. It shocks them, doesn't kill them. They fall off the ladder. You have a fatality. And, of course, the OSHA fine is the least of your problems, really. But that's how it can happen. These things are normally not going to happen, but just give it a little thought. Not something you really want those employees to do, because you really probably haven't trained them on how to do it. We assume everyone knows how to do that safely, but that's a concern if you start assuming that everyone is on the same level of knowledge as you are. They may be more knowledgeable or less knowledgeable. We don't want to assume that they can do it safely. I'm sorry, I am paranoid. I'm in OSHA. I'm paranoid. I've seen all the things that can happen, and they do happen. Not very often, but it happens. So we start working on things. We want to make sure that we're doing it safely. Whether it's a cord and plug type device, whether it's something that's hardwired in where you have to throw a knife switch, don't be working on things when we haven't trained somebody on how to do it safely. And that's, I don't know. They do make devices to lock out a light switch, but if you have 2 light switches on that same, for that light on 2 different spots, you'd want to lock them both out before you go changing the light bulb. You want to de-energize that circuit before you do that. You stick your finger in that socket, and you're going to get a shock. If it's a fluorescent light, maybe not, because those are kind of hard to contact. Those conductors in there. But they I would give it some concern. They make locks to put on breakers. You throw the breaker and then you go verify the energy is not there anymore by either turning the light on or testing it with a piece of approved equipment to verify that the electricity is off, and then it's safe to do some things like that. don't use defective equipment. Again, here somebody took all the time to do this, and it's not approved. The manufacturer is never going to approve that. And if that handle flies off, or if the at the end of that hammer falls or comes off, hits somebody, you got an injury, it's not worth the liability to go and fix stuff like this. Make sure it's good to go. We would recommend that you have a first aid kit. Not required, because you're in an office setting, not supposed to be getting any serious injuries in that sort of a setting, but it's certainly not a bad idea to have a first aid kit. Not necessarily required by OSHA. Other types of hazards, ergonomics, sure. Ergonomics it can be an issue if you have some people doing a lot of typing. You want to make sure their station, their workstation is set up appropriately, so that you don't have issues with the neck or the arms or hand issues, etc. Lifting, don't want to be lifting an excessive amount. That's probably not going to be occurring at your type of facility. And then another one that a lot of people deal with is violence. Now that's becoming a big issue, and OSHA doesn't have a standard for violence, nor do we have one for ergonomics. That doesn't mean they can't issue a citation for it if they deem that you have a problem. Neither one of those should be an issue at a chiropractic office. Okay, they should not be an issue. But let's say you've had 3 violence occurrences in the last 6 months, where you've had an issue with violence at your facility. OSHA is going to ask you, well, that's a hazard. What are you doing to try to prevent it? And you need to have an answer. But if you haven't had one, and you have no reason to suspect it, then it shouldn't be an issue. But once you recognize it as an issue or hazard, then we need to start addressing it. I think that pretty much covers things. If anyone's got any questions, don't hesitate to ask or call me. Again, a brief discussion of the OSHA program. We got OSHA enforcement. You have OSHA consultation. And there's a new HAZCOM standard out there somewhat that you need to train your employees on the new parts of the HAZCOM standard. The new labeling system is a primary part of that with the pictograms. And then obviously we went over some of the hazards associated with an office setting and what you can do to be an effective compliance, which is really follow your operator's manuals for your equipment, train your employees, and hey.
Oh, somehow maybe it's just me, gotta disrupt. So Ken, if you can hear me, thank you very much, and I will talk to you soon, and thank you everyone for attending our webinar.